So please welcome Reverend Charlotte Leach.
Good afternoon. It is wonderful to be here, and I want Fred to understand how much I appreciate him considering me to be a part in this initiative. Our next speaker is Mr. Haile Johnston, and he is one of the founders of Common Market Philadelphia. It's interesting that both of our speakers come from the north. Common Market is the link between more than 80 regional producers and 200 public and private schools, colleges and universities, hospitals, workplaces, grocery stores, nonprofits, and faith institutions throughout the Delaware Valley. Common Market started under the simple premise that everyone deserves to eat good food and growers deserve to earn a fair price. He is a native of Philadelphia and is a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business. Along with that, he is currently serving as co-director of the Common Market, and he is also part of the customer outreach team. He mentioned to me that he is a birthright Quaker, and he practices his religion within the Society of Friends. So we're glad to have him come, and he's actually coming from my home state, Pennsylvania. So please welcome him as he comes to share his dialogue around this issue of food, faith, and justice. Welcome.
Thank you, Reverend. In the spirit of Quaker tradition, actually, I'm going to take a quick moment of silence before we begin. And in the spirit of the Quaker tradition, I'm going to begin talking over your thoughts. I don't know how many of you have been to Quaker meeting, but I always feel like as soon as I get into the groove, as soon as I get deep in thought and really start to commune, somebody stands up and begins to speak. But it's also because they're feeling inspired by the Word of God. So I came here today, I'm actually really proud to be here. I came here today looking for some inspiration, and I think I came to the right place. Are you with me?
Yes.
That's right. I definitely came to the right place. I want to quickly give thanks to Fred Bonson and Wake Forest for bringing Malik and I, inviting Malik and I to come and share with you and learn from you, because I think we're all on both spiritual and learning and life journeys. In the process of sharing, in the spirit of sharing, I'm so excited to take all that you can give to us, or to myself, to Malik, to bring back to Philadelphia or bring back to Detroit, because you're doing amazing work here as well. I've become a little familiar with the work of Foresight Futures, and it's fairly incredible, impressive, and absolutely foundational work for reforming food systems in this region. So give thanks that the work has begun here, and that you have organizations like that, such a strong commitment to faith, to God, to community, to food, to people, to life. I also want to thank Malik. I'm always in awe of Malik's wisdom and the power of his communication. And Malik and I are participating in a fellowship together over the last couple of years, which we've through the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, and we are what is called Food and Community Fellows. And there are, in addition to Malik and I, there are 12 others from around the country who are doing work around food, around sustainable agriculture, around expanding access to good food in communities around the country, using different tools. Some people focused on media, some people doing really deep community work, some folks focused on policy, some folks focused on systems reform. And I've gotten to know Malik a little bit over the last couple of years, but I really feel like my learning from Malik and my sharing with Malik is really just beginning. So actually, I want to give you a round of applause. Thank you for helping me to magnify my praise. So my hope today is to really share a little bit about my own journey, about the journey of my community in Philadelphia, and the work that my wife and I and others are doing together around this Common Market project, Common Market Philadelphia. My hope is to share its evolution because it's constantly changing. It's definitely not static. The evolution of our thoughts, the evolution of our programming, the evolution of our impact, and again, I come here wanting to share, but also wanting to learn, because we see faith communities as being a critical component of how Common Market grows and expands and deepens its work within communities, and especially within underserved minority communities in our region. So quickly, Common Market. What are we? We're a food hub in many ways. That's the way we're often described. Food hub is a tricky word, though, I find, because food hub has come to mean everything and nothing at the same time. It's become one of these words that people substitute for their hopes and dreams, really. It's become a substitute for the salvation of food needs in communities. And so when you say food hub, I feel like I need to go a little deeper with that. What Common Market is we are a non-profit food distribution company, more specifically. And we describe ourselves that way because the customers that we work with are used to buying food from food distribution companies. So it's important for us to communicate our work to our customer base, our customer partners in the marketplace in language that they understand. But it also describes, I think, adequately the work that we do. We are an aggregator and distributor of local and sustainably grown food. We buy food from farmers in our region, typically within 150 miles of Philadelphia. As was mentioned, we're working with over 80 farmers, and we distribute to communities in Philadelphia and in the region. Currently working with close to 200 institutions in our region. And this year we'll do about $2 million in sales of local food. Again, we are a non-profit social enterprise, so actually our goal with our work is to become self-sustaining. Our hope is that we will be able to cover all of our costs from operating income and not have to rely on grant subsidies and things going forward. But I don't want to just talk about kind of where we are today. I want to give you the backstory, because I think that that's really what's relevant to me, who I am really in many ways, how my family has been growing and evolving along with the Common Market, and also to tie into the work that many of you are doing here, and to offer an example of a pathway that we've taken that began in our community of Strawberry Mansion. This idea, this notion of the food desert's been talked about quite a bit. And again, there is food in our community. You can find food, right? It exists in corner stores. However, what's challenging for myself, for my wife, for people in our community, is really the relationship we have with food in many ways. Not just the personal relationship, the relationship in our homes, but also the commercial relationship that Malik described in many ways. Our community of Strawberry Mansion mirrors that of many of the communities of Detroit, which is one of the other reasons I feel particularly connected to Malik, because I know that Malik understands the challenges that we face as a community. I think, as he was talking, you could have substituted Strawberry Mansion in Philadelphia in many of the places where he said Detroit, And the sense that I get, it's also what you would see in a lot of low-income minority communities in this region and many other regions around the country. We are the, Strawberry Mansion has the highest percentage of African Americans in Philadelphia. We are, I think, 98% African American, and I joke with my wife sometimes because she's Guatemalan, and I say, "You're that 2%, right?" But she has a good sense of humor. Along with being the blackest neighborhood in Philadelphia, we have the highest rates of chronic disease and diet-related disease, not just in our region, in the country. And that was something that we were unaware of originally. We've been living in the community for approximately, about 12 years, almost 12 years. And that was something we got to learn about over time. It wasn't something that sort of smacked us in the face when we walked into the neighborhood, in the same way that the blight and deterioration and challenges, some of the other challenges did. So I like to, it's funny because I actually rarely ever use PowerPoint, so this is kind of new to me, but I also love photos and the evocative nature of pictures. And so it's really a treat to be able to actually share some of the images from my community, from our work, and especially to share this photo of Deshauna, who is one of my neighbor's children. I'm actually a father of 3 now, and the reason I don't kick it off with my own kids is because this work began before my wife and I had children, and before I would say I felt like my role on this planet is to be the shepherds of my children. I spent some time recently discovering what my core purpose as a human on this earth, what my contribution to society is, and what I settled on was the idea of repairing the earth for our children and preparing our children for the earth. I was able to land in this space because I really began to find myself through my work with the children of our community, children like Deshauna, even before my wife and I had our own children. So children, while the frame for this conversation has really been what has helped ground me, help me find my connection to the earth, my connection to the Creator, and it's really what motivates me in all the work that I do. And it's, again, the way my wife and I began our work in our community. And upon arriving at Strawberry Mansion, it was, it's one of the, as I described, it's one of the more challenging, let me back up. It's one of the most beautiful neighborhoods in Philadelphia with some of the most pronounced challenges. And when we moved to the community, very little was being done to engage the children in recreation, in beautification, in community gardening, really in any organized, structured activity that was productive. There was actually in our community a very rich tradition of community gardens, and part of that practice, in addition to chasing off the squirrels and spraying plants for the bugs, was chasing the kids out of the garden as well. Children in our community were not engaged in this cultural practice of growing food that was brought to our community by the African Americans who migrated there from the South after World War II. Youth were not engaged in the practice of growing food, in the practice of repairing our community. And when we moved there, when my wife and I moved there, in conversation with many of our neighbors, we thought it was time to do something a little different. So I can get corny too. So I'm going to show you a few pictures related to our work. And this is another, I'm like feeling all these like me and Malik connections today. This is another photo of work that we did with kids in our community around the transformation of space. And I shared these photos because actually a lot of other gardens that we started with kids and did work with kids around. We actually didn't have the foresight to take before and after pictures. But this one is particularly significant because this space actually exists within Fairmount Park, which is directly adjacent to our community. Now, if you can imagine, you have a neighborhood that's largely, well, again, it's almost all African American, that is incredibly blighted, that has all these challenges with diet, with disease, with asthma, with obesity, and right across the street from it is Fairmount Park. And if any of you know anything about Philadelphia, Fairmount Park is like the center of the city. It is the largest inner city park system in the world. It is about 8,000 or 9,000 acres of park in the city. So it's several times larger than Central Park in New York. And directly across the street from our neighborhood, running the full length of our neighborhood, is a 1,000-acre section of Fairmount Park. One of the other things that wasn't happening at that time, there were literally no programs in this park. Now, mind you, 1,000 acres across the street from your community. There were no programs in existence at that moment engaging youth from our community in physical activity or any kind of structured activity in that park. Now, this is not the wilderness that I'm talking about. These are brand new tennis courts, ball fields, every kind of ball field that you can imagine, recreation facilities. There's like a frisbee golf, I don't know if you know what that is. Every kind of opportunity for recreation that you could ever imagine in this park space. And there were no programs for youth from our community, okay? People from all over the region were coming to utilize this park space, but in order to gain a permit to access the park, to play, to engage in recreation, you had to go downtown and pay a fee and all these other things. So all of this existed for other people and not for people in our community. The other thing that the park system was adamantly against, and this is one of the things that's actually remarkable about what Malik's been able to accomplish in Detroit, but in Philadelphia, they were adamantly against the production of food in any way, shape, or form in Fairmount Park. Now, 1,000 acres across from a community that is facing food security challenges, food sovereignty challenges, yet if you wanted to grow food, you had to do it on an abandoned lot where a house was demolished, where there could be potential soil contamination and all these things. As opposed to right across the street from our community where we had vast open space and we actually, folks could actually do something on a more meaningful scale to actually address some of the challenges as opposed to just maybe placing Band-Aids on things. So this was a big victory for us. This is one of the mansions in the park. This is Woodford Mansion. And we had this vision for installing an edible landscape. They were adamantly against it, but we were able to actually make the argument and gain approval as this little pilot, right? And, we're not talking about big space. I know probably most of you who are doing urban agriculture or gardening or agriculture on any scale is much bigger than this, but this was monumental in changing people's way of thinking, both the youth in our community, the adults in our community, as well as the park system in enabling and enabling community participation in the park, and especially with respect to one of the historic mansions, which was like really off limits to the brown folks. We were able to make the argument in a historical context because there was text, written text from Ben Franklin describing the beauty of the orchards at Woodford Mansion. And so we were able to say, in the context of putting this space back into historical use, we wanted to again, install orchards, install edible landscapes, and do it with the youth from our community. So most of our work began engaging youth in horticulture in an effort to beautify our community. And I'll show you some photos of what our neighborhood really looks like. That's what the park looks like, but the neighborhood's a little different. Engaging youth in the beautification of our community. Tatiana's my wife. When we moved there, our thought was, well, if we're going to stay here, because this was not a community that was that either of us had roots in, right? This was a new community to us. We moved there because this was a place where we could afford to live, to be perfectly honest. But we decided that if we were going to stay there, that we had to be part of making the community, making the neighborhood a more livable place. And our approach was not more livable, not better, like not improving the community, not making it better for other folks to move in, but making it a place where our neighbors, and working with our neighbors, to make it a place where folks wouldn't want to leave, where folks would actually want to stay and raise their children. And so we started by trying to do things that other people weren't doing, which were really quality of life things. Vacant lots, picking up trash, planting trees, which hadn't been done in decades. Little simple things. Focused on the environment, connecting youth to the environment. Again, as Malik said, trying to grant them exposure outside of concrete indoors. Getting them into the park, engaging them in recreation, and things like that. And teaching them the value of good hard work, and dispelling some of these images of and connections to slavery and agriculture and horticulture and beautification. So again, just photos of, I'll back up a little bit. Examples of how we work together as a community to transform space and engaging children. So what was just lawn before, where the lawn was cut out and the land was mulched and prepared, then became a multi-layered orchard, which is now, it's funny, the same Fairmount Park system that fought so hard to keep us out of the space now uses this as its signature orchard project, and they celebrate it, and it's expanded, and everybody loves it, and everybody's planting orchards all over the city now, and it's kind of cool. This was, again, in many ways, the beginnings of our work in our community. And not just planting it, of course, working with children to enjoy the fruits of their labor. Can't beat fresh strawberries. And when you plant gardens, when you put seeds in the ground, food comes up. Who knew that? That was like, for us, I wouldn't say that we were skilled in horticulture or anything like that, but what we did know is that if you put seeds in the ground, something was going to grow. And what we wanted to do is engage the children in our community around healthy lifestyles. Using food as a metaphor was our approach, I think, initially, to healthy decision making. So our program was called Healthy Choices. We grew food. We ran fruit stands with the kids, which were like little farmers markets where they were growing and selling food to each other, to their peers at the schools. Healthy cooking classes, after school, summer programs, and things like that. So this is actually this is a photo from the third story of my home. And it was taken on my cell phone, so I apologize, it's not a higher quality image, but this gives you a better sense of what our neighborhood looks like. And some of the work that we've done, this is in the wintertime, obviously. You're looking at a vacant lot, you're looking at the side of a house, actually the sides of a couple houses where homes used to be that have been demolished. And for a long time, what the city of Philadelphia would do, they would demolish a house, and then they would just roll it. They would be gone, and that would turn into like a little mini jungle space. It's the space where drug dealers used to hide their stashes. It's the space where folks used to throw their 40 bottles. It's the space where nothing positive was happening. In fact, youth couldn't even recreate there because it was so overgrown and trash-strewn and dangerous, like literally dangerous. So we began a process of cleaning up these spaces, transforming the spaces where people used to live into places where you could actually have more productive community activity. Where you could bring people together. This is also one of the blessings, actually, in the demolition of a home, is that it creates a palette. So what you see there on the left is a mural that was painted by my brother Kier, which I'm very proud of. And what you see also there is some garden beds. That turquoise thing is a swing set. That's my Airstream that I got off of Craigslist. and open space where kids can go and play. So what it used to be is, you see that little alley there, the kids used to play in the street in the alley. And now what they do is they play on the grass, on a soft surface. Kids get dirty again, which is kind of cool. And we grow food there. This, you know, it's like I'm looking at this, I'm like feeling like I'm at home. This is when I look out my bedroom window, this is what I see. But this is the kind of work that we worked with youth in our community to do. And I wish I had the before pictures, because when we moved to the community, there were 6 abandoned houses in that space. All of them were open, and when I say open, there were no windows, no doors. All of the insides were spilling out into the street. There was trash everywhere. Nobody would walk on that side of the street. And in their absence, we've created space where we actually build community and bring people together, people of all races, come together in a community where, and I know nobody here is from Philadelphia, because folks from Philly, when they hear Strawberry Mansion, they typically wince. It's like 12th Street in Detroit. Strawberry Mansion is that neighborhood where folks that aren't from there don't know. So that's changed quite a bit in a positive way. So after years of doing community building with my wife and our neighbors and engaging youth and learning about our new community, because it is a process, and we've been there 12 years, we're still not accepted as from the community, if you will. Philly's that kind of place, which is okay, I get that. But after many years of building with my neighbors and learning from my neighbors, we became just abundantly aware of the chronic disease and diet-related disease challenges that our neighbors face. And it wasn't just from reading a report, although the report and the statistics did help to quantify that for us. It was also seeing some of my neighbors passing away at very young ages, and seeing some of the young men in my community becoming amputees at very young ages. And in the course of a couple of weeks, actually, seeing 2 of my neighbors die. We decided that we actually had to do something a little more urgent, because our work with youth was an amazing and enriching long-term play for reforming culture, reforming practice, and I think preparing our community for a strong future. But we needed to act immediately to stop the death of our neighbors. We needed to act immediately to find a way to change the way that our community was accessing food, because at that time there was no place to actually shop for good food. So a funny thing happened, and it's amazing when. And one of the reasons I'm so excited to share our story actually is because we've been the beneficiary of this process of sharing ideas. So around this time, when we're just like desperate for solutions to food access and food sovereignty in our community, a man came from across the sea. His name was Martin, and Martin came from Germany, and he wanted to go out to Lancaster County. That the good brother was talking about earlier, and he wanted to see the agricultural practices of the Amish and Mennonite communities. And what he was doing is, this man Martin from Germany was studying appropriate farm technology for Kazakhstan. So he came all the way from Germany and brought us into Lancaster County. And mind you, Lancaster County is only an hour and a half from where we live in Philadelphia, yet we weren't spending any time out in Lancaster County. And so what you see on a daily basis sometimes is concrete, and it becomes part of your mentality. And what you see is your own environment every day, and what you do is share just the same ideas every day. Sometimes you become blind to the opportunities that are right before you. So Martin took us here, which is the Leola Produce Auction. And even though we felt like we were doing fairly progressive, I'll give myself a little props. We were doing fairly progressive work in our own community. We were abundantly unaware of the challenges that other communities in our region were facing as well. Until we went with Martin from Germany out to Lancaster County, to the Leola Produce Auction, which is right down the street from Lancaster City where you were. And at the Leola Produce Auction, it was this explosion of the senses. You know, I mean, all these sights and sounds and smells and colors and textures. And the auctioneer, you know, chanting in the way that I can't even replicate. And I got caught up in that energy. And I said, well, I gotta participate in this, right? I gotta bring some of this back to Philly. And it was the fall, as you can tell by the pumpkins and the cauliflower. And it was also apple season. So I got myself a little auction ticket, registered, and went to participate in buying a smaller lot of apples. Smaller meaning like 10 cases, 10 bushels. And the pricing, you know, he started, again, chirping in his auctioneer way. And the prices began at like $3. I was like, $3? What's he talking about? $3 a bushel for some apples? The prices came up, but it didn't get past like 4 something. And folks were looking around. He was like, going once, going twice. I'm like, bing! I brought my card, and I walked away with 10 cases of apples. My wife said, are you crazy? What are we going to do with 10 cases of apples? I said, we're going to give them to everybody. We paid about, and I forget the exact number, we paid between $4 and $5 a case or a bushel for those apples at that moment. And what was astounding to me was the fact that at that very moment, because we were doing all these nutrition ed programs and cooking classes and fruit stands with the kids in our community, and we were going and buying the same cases of apples for $25 a bushel, wholesale. That was the wholesale price, not the retail price. So we said, wow, wait a second, $5? $25. You have farmers who are being paid prices here in Amish country who are effectively being exploited by the food system. Being paid prices that do not sustain their activities or sustain their families or sustain their workforce. Being paid prices that are, again, exploitative and extractive from their community here in Lancaster County. And an hour and a half away, in Strawberry Mansion in Philadelphia, you have children and adults who are food insecure, who are struggling to access healthy foods. And even when it is available, it's usually very low quality and very high priced. So a light went off. We were inspired at that moment. We said, hey, maybe there's an opportunity for us to play a role bridging these two communities, creating connections, creating relationships between Amish and Mennonite growers and sustainable family farmers in our region and low-income minority communities like ours. And so that's where the common market came from. It really came from our connection and work with youth in our community. It came after years of learning, of living within Strawberry Mansion. And it took a man from Germany to bring us, you know, down the road to show us the light. His name happened to be Martin. Go figure. So as was mentioned earlier, Common Market, effectively, we create the link between local farms and communities in the Delaware Valley. So our strategy has become, or initially was that we actually, in order to be a self-sustaining social enterprise, we were going to have to get to scale. So that was always the vision from the beginning. The vision was, and this is actually also informed by years of doing grassroots nonprofit work in Strawberry Mansion, struggling to attract the attention of funders, to validate the work that we were doing, to make it possible to pay ourselves and other folks in our community barely a living wage, a family supporting wage, and the challenges with that. And so we said, you know what, if we're gonna start another nonprofit, like let's do a different model. Let's try to find a way so that we can actually create something that pays for itself at some point, right? Create something that actually might even have a little bit of profit over our costs, so that we could actually contribute some of this money back into communities like ours to support some of the grassroots efforts at growing food with kids and doing nutrition education and investing in the future of our communities. But let's create an institution that actually has the ability to sustain its own activities from its operations. And so in this idea of the food hub, we began thinking about how we could connect the growers with larger consumers of food. And we settled on this idea of working with institutions first. First and foremost, because it was actually these institutions that were serving many of the communities that we were trying to work with. Public schools in Philadelphia, many of the low-income children in these schools actually get almost 2/3, if not more, of their calories on a daily basis from the schools. Elder care facilities, they're getting, in many cases, 100% of their calories from these places. These are all low-income, vulnerable communities. Again, like Strawberry mentioned, in some ways, where we thought that we could have, I'm going to say, a magnified impact initially, as well as help us reach critical mass, right? This idea of building scale, this idea of aggregating demand, which I'm going to come back to later on. So we decided to work with institutions. The other thing was that the food system and the food distributors, the conventional food distributors that were operating in this space, claimed to lack the capacity to manage relationships with farmers. I was like, well, where are y'all getting your food then if you can't manage relationships with farmers, and especially when they're only an hour and a half down the road? And they're getting their food from all over the world, and it's coming in cardboard boxes and in cans. And very little of that food that they were distributing to these institutions was actually whole food. So part of our vision became around the idea of transforming institutional food in our region as a means to gain access to communities like ours, as a means to begin to scale. And this is a little, this diagrams, I think, fairly well, effectively the role that we play. We buy from no middlemen. We buy from no distributors, no brokers. We buy directly from farmers. We do what those big guys and gals, the institutional food distributors that were serving a lot of the hospitals and schools and elder care facilities and supermarkets, we do what they claim that they couldn't do. We actually engage the farmers in our region and maintain those relationships and build trust with them and pay them fair prices for their food. And so again, just a couple pictures of how we bring this food, and not just produce, actually, animal products as well. One of the keys to our success, I think, is the fact that our animal products actually are produced year-round. Whereas we live in a climate where you can only produce fruits and vegetables for part of the year. And by selling a diverse selection of animal products, yogurts, cheeses, ground beef, turkey, chicken, we're able to provide value to our customers on a year-round basis. So again, this harvesting from the fields in our region, from the lovely counties, packaging of this product, bringing it back to our warehouse, aggregated from, again, over 80 farmers, put on trucks, delivered to the kitchens and salad bars and supermarkets in our region. Again, trying to transform this relationship with food. Always maintaining the identity of the farmer when we sell food. So everything from the case that it's sold in, to the sales list, to the packaging itself, to the displays in the supermarket, highlight the name of the farmer. Talk about the way that the food was grown, their production values. And none of it could be possible without partnerships. I'm going to speak to that quickly right here. I want to show you how this little idea that came from Strawberry Mansion, what's cool about this map, actually I think there's a pointer here, Strawberry Mansion is right here, right in the middle of Philadelphia. And this is Fairmount Park. So you can see the park adjacent to our community is actually bigger than the community itself. So this little idea that grew out of work with kids, and this is like for me, like what gets exciting is that, you know, again, this all came from working with youth in our community here, has begun to grow and impact. And in partnership with this organization up here, there it is, Farm to City, we're beginning to expand outside of just wholesale distribution of food to institutions, but also beginning to do more creative direct-to-consumer work as well. Because one of the struggles that we faced while we had this grand strategy for getting to scale and engaging institutions in our work was coming back to my community of Strawberry Mansion. How do we impact the household level consumption of local and sustainable foods? Not just what do I get fed when I go to school, or what am I fed when I go to the hospital, but what can we provide ourselves in our community? What can we provide ourselves? What can we cook for each other in our kitchens? What can we share? What can we teach each other? And how can we change our relationships with food? These red dots right here are the Farm to City farmers markets that we're partnering with right now. And so these represent 15 farmers markets around the region, most of them centered in Philadelphia. You can see one right there in Strawberry Mansion. One of the things we were told when we first started to organize was that farmers did not want to come to our community. The farmers were not interested in selling food to our community. I mean, literally in those words. And I was dumbfounded by this idea. I said, well, you know, they're growing food, they're being paid amounts of money that doesn't support their activity. Why would they not want to sell to a market that doesn't have access to it? And it was out of fear, it was out of a lack of understanding, cultural understanding, a lack of communication, cultural differences. Again, we're talking about mainly, not exclusively, mainly Amish and Mennonite communities that don't use technology, and largely African American and Latino low-income communities in Philadelphia. So a bit of that has changed, and it's changed because of the introduction of EBT, wireless EBT technology that has allowed farmers to run markets in communities and benefit from some of the food assistance programs. So these are again about these 15 farmers markets. We're also doing direct-to-consumer work, winter harvest and farm share programs. And it's actually our farm share program that is evolving into our farm, or that has evolved also into our Farm to Faith program, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But through the winter harvest, which is a buying club, similar to what Malik was talking about, we're operating at, I think it's 17 sites, so those are the orange dots. And the farm share sites, which aren't quite as prominent there, but there's last year there were 19 farm share sites interacting with 650 families in our region. And the scale changes as this goes, and I apologize for that, but what I wanted to demonstrate was also our relationships with common market customers, which are largely institutions around the region that right now go from Wilmington to the Princeton, New Jersey area, and so those are denoted in purple. And then zooming out even further, you get about a 150-mile lens on our relationships, and the light green ones are the relationships with the farmers. So Common Market and Farm to City are actually working with more than 225 farmers in our region. Again, all this came from little old Strawberry Mansion where we were kids. And rooted in I think, a very strong value system. And I'm going to breeze over our values just a little bit, and these are the sort of the values that we share publicly. But again, the most important in so many ways for us began with our community and our commitment to our community of Strawberry Mansion, and making sure that everything we do embodies our community, and making sure that our organization for eternity mirrors the community of Strawberry Mansion. And my wife and I literally had to fight over the last, mind you, this has been 4.5 years since we moved our first box of produce. We have had to fight in order to maintain that identity and that commitment to Strawberry Mansion in the name and face of this organization. More than 50% of the people that have been hired to work at Common Market since its history have come from Strawberry Mansion community, which is a point of pride for my wife and I, and it's a point of struggle because it's not easy, and it's meant that we've had to be very deliberate and face a lot of challenges and work extra hard to build capacity with some folks that we brought in, but it is from our community that we came from, and it's to our community. We remain committed. Related to environmentalism, the idea of stewardship, safety being critical, because we do not want to sicken or poison anyone through our work. And certainly, one of the things we're trying to do, again, is change relationships. And the industrial food system, I think, has not just sickened our bodies, but I think it's sickened our mentality and connection to food. Local investment and faith. So we, as part of our struggle, again, as part of this commitment to community, I say our struggle in impacting household level consumption of food, we were trying to figure out how we transition from having built very real competencies around institutional food service and managing relationships with institutions to how that translates into impacting household level access. And it began also, again, looking at our own community and what kinds of institutions were present in our community, what kinds of institutions were strong in our community, what kinds of institutions had leadership in our community, which institutions have facility in our community. And again, if you've been to Philadelphia, one of the things you know is that there's a church on every block almost. And it is the church, and actually a part that I didn't mention was that Strawberry Mansion actually, from the time it was built for the first, I want to say 60 or, and for about the first 60 years, it was a largely Jewish community. And so there was a rich Jewish heritage in our community before World War II, when a lot of African Americans began to move to the community. And so many of the churches that, and many of them are Baptist churches in our neighborhood now, were former synagogues, and all of the beauty of the Jewish tradition is reflected in the architecture in our community. So it's actually pretty special. So we initiated this Farm to Faith program, and we really see that this is the way we're going to transform not just access in communities like ours, right, household level access, but also begin to transform the culture around food and our relationships of food. The Reverend Rivers this morning and several after him, I think, have mentioned their connection to the pulpit. I believe there's real power with the pulpit and power within faith communities that have the ability to make these kinds of transformations. And again, one of the reasons I'm excited to be here is to learn from your experiences. And try to get through these quickly. The program has effectively initiated as a sort of in a buying club model, or what's also been described as a CSA model for community-supported agriculture model. What we're trying to do, and where we see a lot of promise working with churches, is in this notion of aggregated demand. Faith communities are bringing masses of people together on a regular basis, focused on spiritual well-being, and one of the things that I'm excited about doing is partnering with folks to focus on physical well-being as well. And using this aggregation of people and ideas and to bring food together, or bring food to faith communities in ways that are affordable and accessible and pervasive in communities like ours. We talk about this program not as a CSA. We're deliberate about not calling it a CSA because this notion of community supporting agriculture is in my mind, extractive in some ways, right? It's a unidirectional flow of resources, if you will. I talk about it in the way of communities and agriculture supporting each other, trying to bring a notion of balance between the relationship between the consumer and the producer of food, a mutually beneficial idea. a relationship that is going to enrich the well-being of urban communities and the cultural and economic well-being of rural food-producing communities as well. And the role that we play is that of connecting and effectively building relationships between these communities, making this connection of food and faith and really relationships, regional health and well-being possible. Outside of our community, I actually last week had the pleasure of going down to Alabama and working with folks at the Deep South Food Alliance. And this is another way that faith community has played a role in reforming food systems in another region. And I just wanted to share that with you. And these folks are getting together. It's in the Black Belt in Alabama. These are African-American, under-resourced farmers. And their efforts have been, they effectively needed a fiscal sponsor to attract grant money to provide technical assistance for them to, again, they know how to grow the food, but to help them gain access to the marketplace. And the United Christian Community Association played that role because they had that structure and they had that entity that could be the conduit for those funds. And this is the sweet potato guru of Tuskegee University, right? Dr. Connor, opening up cabbages. Some more pictures from down there. Again, so I end this conversation, or I end my sharing with a photo of my daughter. This is in that space across the street from my house. That is a bunch of beets that she planted and harvested, and you can, I think you can feel the pride on her face now. The tricky part is getting her to eat those beets. But we're working on that too. And holding up some carrots that are also part of the harvest. Again, I really thank you for inviting myself and the lead to share with you. And I'm excited to learn from you as well. So peace and blessings.
We have time for one question again. Is there a question among you that you want to ask right now? Yes.
I was just wondering how you were able to engage the youth in Strawberry Mansion when you first started your project.
Yeah, I apologize too, because Fred actually came to me before I started speaking. He's like, can you leave more time for question and answer? The funny thing is that the way we started literally was we just went out on the block in front of an abandoned house and started cleaning up trash. My wife did. And kids playing all around were the new folks on the block. And at first, they're looking at us like we're crazy. What are y'all doing, picking up trash, right? Which is, I don't know, it seems like a sort of basic idea, right? You live on the block, you pick up your block. But there has been such a culture of abandonment and divestment in our community for so long that the idea of it being our block in many ways is lost in some strange way, or was lost, I think, in some strange way. And so this was in front of an abandoned house, and the attitude was, well, I don't own that house, so why would I pick up that trash? Well, shoot, I got to look at it every day, so that's why we're going to pick up that trash. And you guys are playing here, and so that's why we're going to pick up this trash. And so we started cleaning up the trash, and that attracted us. I feel like this is a little red hen moment in so many ways. We started picking up trash, and we actually didn't get any assistance from that, but got a lot of eyes, a lot of attention. But then after we picked up the trash and then pulled out all of the weeds, folks were really curious, and then began to turn the soil. And with each action, with each activity, which were not necessarily on the same day, there was more and more interest in what we were doing. And by the time we brought this, a tray of petunias, I think we started planting petunias and marigolds or something silly like that. Kids were like, "Ooh, what's that?" Right? And so we had done all this work to prepare the space and brought the flowers, and the kids wanted to participate. And they got so excited about the activity and about being engaged at all, because adults weren't engaging kids on our block. That they just wanted to do more. And so it began with just the abandoned house that was nearest our house, and then it began and expanded to all the abandoned houses on our block. And then we said, well, hey, the kids are loving this, and we're actually feeling it too. So why not formalize it? So, thank you.
I'm really grateful to Hailey, as I know you all are. Let's join in and thank him again.